Welcome to session 4, Earnest and Option Money. I'm here with Alan Seshka from the Seshka Group, and I'm Keith Milkiewicz from Lux Residential Group, and we're here to talk about contracts and real estate. And we're assuming that we just went under contract to either buy or sell a home, and now we're going to talk about earnest and option money. And Alan, I'm hoping you can help me out here and discuss this. So we just went under contract, and we've been told that we're owed earnest and option money, or we have to pay earnest and option money as a buyer. What does that mean? What is earnest and option money?
So your earnest money is essentially the guarantee that you're going to go through with the contract. The option fee is a fee that's paid for someone to have the right to do their due diligence and retain a right to terminate that contract during that period.
Okay, so the option period is typically utilized as the due diligence period. What usually happens during due diligence?
So number one, buyer's going to go over there and get their inspection. And then after the inspection, start negotiating on any types of repairs or what have you that need to occur to the property. So I always say, leave yourself good enough amount of time there, 10 days minimum, maybe 7 days, but that's pushing it.
And as a buyer, I want to strongly recommend if you are a buyer, get your agent to take a look at all the different things that may be required during inspection. So if you have a septic, if you're on LCR requirements, if you have a well, if you're on land and agriculture, or if you're building on that lot, make sure you're giving yourself ample time to finish and complete your due diligence period. So I now know that I owe earnest and option money. What is earnest money for?
Earnest money is essentially the promise that you're going to close the contract. Also, it's compensation for the seller to take the property off the market. I will say that it's not required. $0 is actually allowed, but in 99% of the cases, a conventional sale is going to have some earnest money.
Okay, and when does that typically due?
So earnest and option are due in 3 days after the effective date, 3 business days. Saturdays, Sundays, and federal holidays don't count. So 3 days after you sign that contract.
And the day of the contract execution is day 0. So the first day on a 1 to 4 family contract starts the day after the execution date. So if I were to have a executed contract on a Wednesday, then that would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So that typically means if it falls on a Saturday, then Monday would be the next day that it would be available for time of the essence, so to speak.
Exactly.
And what does time of the essence mean in the contract?
So times of the essence is a legal term, which means you don't get 1 second after the deadline. So if times of the essence is not mentioned, if you have a good reason for not being able to get that earnest money there, then a court's going to listen to it. When you say time is of the essence, the court's not going to listen to those reasons.
Okay. Am I allowed to go in with $0 option? What would be the reason why I would do that, and why would I not want to do that?
You can say I'm not going to pay anything for an option period, and that just means you don't have the right to terminate. And you're doing that sometimes to show that you're very serious about buying the property. If it's a multiple bid situation, a seller may say, well, good, they don't have an option period. I like that bid better.
Okay, so in the option period, a buyer can walk away from that house for any reason whatsoever and get their earnest money back. And if you go 1 day after the option period, then the earnest money becomes part of the default remedy, correct?
Yep.
And then it's a fight, is that?
Yeah, so the earnest money's hard, and if you try to terminate after your option period, that's going to be a fight. Seller's going to say buyer's a reason for the contract not going forward. Buyer's going to say seller's a reason, and then you start hiring up lawyers.
Outside of the earnest money, are there other damages that would be paid if the parties terminated contract?
Yeah, you get your actual damages, attorney's fees, and court costs if you have to sue to recover that earnest money.
And what does it mean in 5A2 that the buyer shall submit an additional earnest money, and why would that be important?
So you have a space for your first amount of earnest money, which is usually due 3 days after effective date. And then you have a secondary earnest money that's due a later date. And it's usually when there's a multiple bid situation. And so you don't know if you're going to win this bid or not. So you're waiting to pay that big chunk of earnest money, and then you have a small bit of earnest money in the first one. In those situations, we don't see the ton, but it is used some.
Yes, and we're in a down market right now, so we're not seeing a ton of multiple offers. But just a year ago, we had many offers where we're competing with 20 or 25 people.
Yeah.
But you're only allowed to have one backup offer on a contract, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, and if you go into a backup scenario, there is an amendment for that, and that's typically where you put the secondary amount of earnest money that's going to be due within the contract in 5A2. So what would be the reason why you would terminate an option at all during the option period?
So after you get your inspection back, you're going to have a free right to terminate during that option period. That's the great majority of the reasons that people are terminated. They find out there's foundation issue. They find out the roof is bad or AC is bad, something of that nature. However, that option period is used quite a bit for buyer's remorse. They don't want to go through the contract for whatever reason. Wife doesn't like the property or what have you, and you're going to say yes, ma'am, and then go terminate.
Okay, and that's a big difference I've heard from other states that don't have really typically an option period. Many other states just have a due diligence for doing an inspection, but our option period affords you the ability to get out of that contract for any reason during that time period, correct?
Yep, exactly.
How much money is typically paid for an earnest and option fee?
So we see 1% of purchase price is your earnest money, and then 1% of 1% is going to be your option fee. Personally, I try to negotiate that down lower to $100, $200 or what have you on a $500,000 purchase price for the option period. But both of them are both negotiable, whatever the parties decide.
Okay, so that is negotiable. And what happens if the closing doesn't close by the date stipulated within the contract?
So if your close date passes and there's not a closing, there's going to be an evaluation at the court level as to why did it not close. Was it buyer reason or seller reason? And invariably, seller's going to appoint it buyer, buyer's going to appoint it seller, and then a fight starts over that earnest money. Earnest money disputes are probably the most common dispute in a TREC 1 to 4 purchase contract dispute is fighting over that earnest money.
Okay, so earnest and option money are very, very important, and I think that the TREC contracts really gives both sides of the transaction the ability to complete their due diligence, have good, positive reason to move forward with confidence once that option period is over with, right? So just to summarize things, so you have 3 days from the date of contract to submit your earnest and option money. The typical gold standard for earnest and option money is 1% for the earnest money and 1% of 1% for the option money. So on a $500,000 deal, you're looking at $5,000 earnest, $500 for option. That's typical gold standard. However, it is always negotiable. A buyer can terminate contract for any reason during their option period, and the option period in terms of days is always negotiable. You should always have money, some type of money during the option period. If you have $0, you have no option. You still, if you do $0 for an option period, you still should do your due diligence and go through a home inspection. However, if you have $0 as an option, that means your earnest money is at risk. You can still terminate contract, but the default remedy, I believe, is the earnest money ends up going to the sellers if you decide to terminate contract without an option. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, well, I wish you guys the best of luck in your buying and selling process. Thank you so much for tuning in to Series 4 Earnest and Option Money. We'll see you next time.